In 1964, social psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a lesser-known variation of his obedience experiments involving rapid social exposure rather than authority commands. Participants were placed in controlled group settings where strangers evaluated one another with almost no information beyond presence, posture, and initial behavior. What emerged was not deliberation, but immediate classification. Subjects were consistently assigned levels of perceived importance within seconds, long before any meaningful interaction could occur. The unsettling detail was this: the ratings remained stable even after extended conversation contradicted them. If humans can assign social value in seconds, and then defend that judgment even when evidence changes, what exactly are they seeing when they look at you for the first time? Thoughtful. This phenomenon sits within what social cognition research refers to as rapid trait inference. The brain constructs a working model of social value before language meaningfully contributes. The core mechanism is not accuracy, it is efficiency. Daniel Kahneman's distinction between System 1 and System 2 thinking is critical here. System 1 does not ask for permission. It assigns meaning instantly using patterns shaped by prior exposure, cultural coding, and evolutionary bias toward hierarchy detection. What most people misunderstand is this: you are not being evaluated consciously in the first moments of meeting someone. You are being categorized. By the end of this analysis, you will be able to recognize the signals that trigger that categorization, and more importantly, identify when it is being used to control outcomes in social environments without explicit force. Human beings do not begin with judgment. They begin with scanning. In naturalistic observation studies of group formation, individuals consistently establish implicit rank before any structured conversation begins. Eye contact duration, entry timing, posture orientation, and micro movements of hesitation are processed as status indicators. The brain is not asking, "Who is this person?" It is asking, "Where does this person belong in relation to me?" Status is not communicated, it is inferred through behavioral friction, how much resistance your presence creates in the attention of others. Detection tool. If people slightly reposition themselves when you enter a space, you are being mapped into a hierarchy before speech begins. That mapping often determines conversational control later. This baseline categorization becomes the foundation for everything that follows, but it is not fixed yet. It can still be reinforced or disrupted. That is where the second layer begins. Once an initial classification is formed, the brain begins searching for confirmation, not truth. This aligns with cognitive consistency theory and the broader mechanism of confirmation bias identified extensively in Kahneman and Tversky's work. The observer is no longer neutral. They are testing whether their first impression holds. A person perceived as high status is given subtle advantages: slightly longer listening time, reduced interruption frequency, and increased interpretive generosity. A person perceived as low status experiences the opposite: faster topic shifts, more frequent corrections, and reduced narrative patience. People do not treat you according to who you are. They treat you according to the hypothesis they formed about you in the first seconds, and then defend that hypothesis through interaction. Detection tool. Watch for conversational elasticity. If your statements are expanded upon by others, you are in a high confirmation loop. If they are compressed or redirected, the loop is working against you. But this creates a paradox. Because the system is not static, it is reactive, and that leads to a deeper layer of manipulation and adaptation. Human groups stabilize hierarchy through feedback loops. Small signals are amplified when they align with group expectations. This is closely related to social proof mechanisms described by Robert Cialdini. Individuals do not independently evaluate status. They observe how others respond, then synchronize their perception accordingly. A single moment of confident behavior can cascade into perceived authority if the group responds with deference. Conversely, a minor hesitation can cascade into perceived uncertainty if it is socially echoed. The group does not detect truth, it detects consensus about truth. Detection tool. Notice who others unconsciously look at before responding to you. That gaze is the real indicator of perceived authority distribution in the room. At this point, something important happens. Initial impressions stop being personal, they become collective property. But here is where it becomes more complex. The assumption so far is that first impressions are stable. They are not. They are recalibrated continuously when exposed to contradictory high salience signals. Research in expectancy violation theory shows that when an individual displays behavior inconsistent with initial categorization, especially behavior that carries emotional weight, the brain updates its model rapidly. A previously low-status individual who demonstrates unexpected composure under pressure can trigger full reclassification. Hierarchy is not locked in the first 7 seconds. It is locked in the first 7 seconds unless disrupted by emotionally significant contradiction. This is the key misunderstanding in most surface-level interpretations of social dominance. It is not about initial perception alone. It is about whether perception is challenged with sufficient force to override itself, which leads into a more uncomfortable implication. There is a measurable delay between behavioral change and social recognition of that change. Even when a person's demeanor shifts, others often continue interacting with the outdated version of them for a period of time. This is identity lag. It is a form of cognitive inertia. It is related to schema persistence in cognitive psychology. Once a mental model is formed, it resists updating unless forced by repeated contradiction. Most people are not responding to you. They are responding to a cached version of you stored in their perception. Detection tool. If you have changed how you present yourself but others continue to treat you as before, you are experiencing identity lag rather than accurate perception. This is where subtle dominance becomes interesting, because it is not only about how others classify you, it is about how long they refuse to update that classification, and that refusal is not neutral. It shapes opportunity distribution. Dominance in early social perception is rarely forceful. It is informational. The individual who controls pacing, clarity, and ambiguity in early interaction effectively controls how others categorize them. This is not manipulation in the dramatic sense. It is structure control. In experiments on conversational leadership, individuals who introduce clarity earlier in interactions are consistently assigned higher perceived competence even when actual content quality is equivalent. People confuse clarity with authority because uncertainty creates cognitive load, and the brain assigns authority to what reduces that load fastest. Detection tool: notice who resolves ambiguity in group discussions. That person is often unconsciously assigned leadership status, regardless of formal role. This brings us to a deeper contradiction. Because if these mechanisms are universal, they apply equally to everyone observing them, including you. If humans assign hierarchy in seconds, reinforce it through bias loops, and resist updating it through cognitive inertia, then social reality is not a reflection of truth. It is a stabilized perception system built on incomplete data. Which raises a difficult observation. Every interaction you have ever interpreted as natural was partially structured by invisible categorization processes happening beneath awareness. And those same processes are operating on you right now in every new environment you enter. The most unsettling implication is not that people judge quickly, it is that they believe their quick judgments are careful ones. Now that you understand the mechanism, there are only a few variables you can actually influence. First, entry consistency. The brain assigns hierarchy during entry behavior more than during conversation. Controlled posture, steady pacing, and absence of hesitation reduce negative initial categorization signals. Second, early ambiguity reduction. The faster you clarify your role in a social setting without over-explaining, the less room there is for misclassification to stabilize. Third, contradiction timing. If you need to change perception, it cannot be gradual alone. It must include at least one high salience moment that violates expectation, calm under pressure, precision under uncertainty, or controlled disagreement in a context where compliance is expected. Perception does not update linearly. It updates in shocks. The system that judges you in seconds is the same system you can disrupt, but only if you understand that you are not correcting opinions. You are rewriting a model that is trying to conserve itself, and once you see that, you stop thinking of social interaction as communication and start recognizing it as continuous classification. Next, we move into what happens when those classifications are intentionally engineered before you ever speak.